Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for May 10th, 2024. When you hear my report today, I think you will hopefully make the decision to sign up for our offer for one free month of the Daily Alert. The offer will be linked below in the description section, but as you hear the developments that I'm going to be reporting, you'll see why it's so essential that you have access to the intelligence that we process daily to give you and your colleagues an opportunity to play a role in shaping the political reaction and the philosophical thinking that's required to break out of a collapsing world order. Now, the topic today is the old order is dying. And you've heard this from the LaRouche movement and from Lyndon LaRouche over many, many years, that the corrupt liberal international order cannot survive. Now, this time, it's not just our movement that's saying that. And let me caution you that the source I'm using for this is the London Economist, the magazine originally set up to promote global free trade policy on behalf of the City of London interests. And secondly, that the Economist obviously has an ulterior motive, which is to try to bring people around to their point of view to shape their plan B. But it's worth noting what they say. So I'm going to begin with the blurb from the editor-in-chief, Zanny Minton-Bedos, who sent this out as part of the promotion of the May 9th issue. When I joined The Economist in the 1990s, the liberal international order was at its zenith, and the golden age of globalization was propelling economic integration, cooperation, and financial freedom. Of course, that's the view of The Economist. It's not true, but she goes on to say, those days are over. Global capital flows are now fragmenting. The world's governments are imposing sanctions more than 4 times as often, and Western-led institutions are either decaying or defunct. Our cover story in most of the world is frank in its message. The old order is dying. Its sudden collapse could be sudden and irreversible. Now, let me then go to the second paragraph in the actual article. The article begins by presenting the illusion of prosperity and that everything's okay. But then it goes and it says the following. Look deeper, though, and you see fragility. For years, the order that has governed the global economy since the Second World War has been eroded. Today, it is close to collapse. A worrying number of triggers could set off a descent into anarchy, where might is right and war is once again the resort of the great powers. Let's be frank. Might is right is the existing order that's collapsing. And war, it has been the resort of the great powers. But it goes on to say, even if it never comes to conflict, the effect on the economy of a breakdown in norms could be fast and brutal. So there you have it from The Economist. Now, the article goes on to describe the symptoms which led to its conclusions, but ignores the elephant in the room. The present liberal democratic order is a fig leaf to cover an imperial construct of predatory corporate cartels imposing rules which benefit only the cartels. It's an order held in place by US and NATO military power and always has been. So you step out of line of the so-called rules and see what happens. And it's one which depends on increasingly heavy hybrid warfare, that is fake news and censorship, which leads to brainwashing while distracting those suffering from the effects of the collapse by giving them a heavy dose of the rock, sex, drug, entertainment culture, which is designed to dull the senses and to lead to complacency in the face of a collapse. Now, what's also true is that this liberal order is being rejected in most of the world, the so-called global south. And it's not really very popular anymore in the nations where it's headquartered, including in Europe and the United States. Most of the rest of the world, though, is not falling for the anti-growth green ideology which is being peddled internationally, nor the phony binary choices of left and right or democracy versus authoritarianism. How democratic is it when elections are rigged, where governments are committing fraud, and where people are being told lies about the future? Now, LaRouche was prophetic, going back to his post-August 15th, 1971 forecast. And you'll remember that 1971 was the year that Nixon essentially moved to end the Bretton Woods system of a fixed exchange system with a gold reserve. And within 2 years, the Bretton Woods system was gone. We were in an era of floating exchange, essentially a casino economy. And what LaRouche warned then, as this was happening in August 1971, he warned that the establishment would resort to Shaktian economic policies. That is, the economic policies of fascism, which is corporate cartels dictating through governments what the policy should be. And he said that this would end up in periods of war and chaos. Now, in response to this, what LaRouche did was offer decades of initiatives, development projects, and development based on scientific and technological cooperation among sovereign states. The idea being that there was nothing inevitable about a spin into global depression and depopulation that couldn't be reversed by what he described increasingly as American system economic policies, especially investment in infrastructure, science and progress, and a banking system which had national credit, not to bail out private interests and private banks, but for the benefit of the physical economy of the whole nation. And that if we went back to that in the United States, we could offer a similar capability to the rest of the world, which is how the modern era came into existence in the post-Civil War period of the United States, when American system methods led to the industrialization of Bismarck's Germany, of Sergei Witta's Russia, of the Meiji Restoration in Japan, and so on. So LaRouche presented these programs, and the attempt to silence LaRouche, which was carried out by the same establishment that he was criticizing, made him a folk hero to many, and people saw him as a visionary committed to truth. And that's why his ideas are now shaping the fight against this dying order. The Belt and Road Initiative goes back to his idea of Eurasian land bridge and the connection between Europe and Eurasia through high-speed rail, corridors of development, and so on. And at all times, LaRouche presented an anti-geopolitical approach, as opposed to one nation's gain being another nation's loss, the idea which is called by Xi Jinping today the win-win, that all nations can benefit from proper investment in future physical economic development. Now, that's why the Executive Intelligence Review Daily Alert is so important, because it will give you an opportunity to see day by day the unfolding of a LaRouchian analysis of what's happening, as opposed to being dependent upon the whims of the editors of The Economist, who are really trying to figure out how to bail out the bankrupt system. Now, today's Friday. I only got one question, and I'm not sure why, but you can always send me your questions and we'll take them up on Fridays. This one is from Thomas B. And he raises the question of BlackRock doing heavy investment in India. I will say it's not just India. BlackRock is in Ukraine. BlackRock is waiting to move in and take over Gaza. BlackRock is one of the leading financial corporations as part of the military-industrial financial complex. But he goes on to say that part of that he sees this investment in India as part of a campaign to distance India from China, to weaken the BRICS. And he writes that he hopes Indian government leaders are wise enough to remember the long fight for independence from the British Empire. And he asks what I think of that. Well, Mrs. LaRouche has discussed that several times recently. And what she comes back to is that there are domestic political concerns that are playing into this, including Modi at times opportunistically using a divide between Muslim and Hindu population. You have, of course, Blinken constantly in India. You have US and NATO representatives trying to convince India to become part of the global NATO. But if you want to know what's really going on, take a look at the works and position of Jai Shankar, who is the foreign minister. He's been very clear, and he has said that India's best tradition is that of the non-aligned, where India stands with sovereign nations and a commitment to their development, and that India is now increasingly involved in Africa, for example, along with China and Russia, and the three of the leading BRICS countries. And what's their goal? It's to provide for the awakening African nations an alternative to the International Monetary Fund, an alternative to the looting of the corporate cartels, and the ability of those countries to establish sovereign relations among each other, to use the wealth of raw materials as well as the wealth of human material, the large populations, especially of young people, to develop their own countries as they wish. As the outspoken foreign minister of South Africa repeatedly says to Europeans and people like Blinken, don't come here to tell us what we should do. We're a sovereign nation. We're doing what we want to do. And I think that's an important point. Now, India is in the midst of an election campaign. I think we'll get more clarity after the election is over. But the Indians have, from the time of independence, displayed a non-aligned position, which has in recent years enabled India to have a very rapid rate of real economic development. And as you point out, Thomas, the development of India was based on the fight from Mohandas Gandhi, Nehru, Indira Gandhi, and others, the fight against colonial subjugation. And the proud people of India are not going to submit to that if they know what it is and what it represents. And right now, the British-American geopolitical strategy is to break up the BRICS, pit nations against each other, pit Russia and China against each other, India against China, and so on. I don't think it's going to work because, as we started this discussion, the old order, which wants India to be a central part of it, is breaking down. Why would India jump back on the sinking Anglo-American ship when it's moving boldly into space alongside China, Russia, and other countries? And the bigger question is, when will the United States realize that our best interests, and the same can be said of Western European nations, the best interests of these nations from the old order would be to get out of the old order as soon as possible, throw it away like dirty old underwear, and get into this collaborative effort to establish a new security and development architecture which benefits all people of all nations. So thanks for joining me this week. Don't forget you can sign up for a free 1-month subscription to the EIR Daily News. And I'll see you again next week.